The Pokemon world is a place that presents itself as a magical utopia that is full of sunshine and rainbows, where you can just hang out with your Pokemon all day and be at peace. But sadly, it is not that at all. For the Pokemon in particular, some of them have lives that are literal torture. Every waking moment of their existence is a never-ending experience of agony that many would shudder to even conceive. So naturally, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be covering 10 Pokemon whose lives are never-ending torture, and if there's one thing that goes good with the subject of torture, it's a sponsorship, which is why I am sponsoring myself to let you guys know about my giveaway for Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. So basically, I also make Pokemon remixes in addition to videos, and they're available to listen to on Spotify and other streaming services, and doing so really helps the channel back here. I also just released a new album of Pokemon remixes as well, so for every 5,000 new listeners I can get on Spotify by the time the Sinnoh remakes come out, I'm gonna give away a copy of the games. So check that out because it's super appreciated and helps me to put out the best content for you guys that I can, and you might even win a copy of Diamond and Pearl while you're at it. And now, with that said, let's get into the torturous lives of some of our beloved Pokemon. One of the classic entries in this department is Spoink. Spoink is easily one of the cutest Pokemon of all time. I mean, just look at it. But Spoink is merely putting on a cute face, because its life is nothing short of exhausting. According to its Pokedex entries, Spoink's cute bouncing is what makes its heart beat. And if it stops at any time, its heart will also stop and it will die. That basically means that Spoink's life, until it evolves into a Grumpig, is a never-ending, exhaustive fight against death itself, where it literally cannot stop working and is always at risk of its bouncing being interrupted and dropping dead instantly. Now, aside from how miserable and exhausting this would make Spoink's life, having to bounce around 24/7, it would be just as bad from a mental standpoint. Even if it's in shape enough to take on the physical toll of constant bouncing, Spoink would be forced to live with the constant fear that at any time, something could come along and mess up the rhythm of its bounces, or even stop it from bouncing entirely. If that happened for even a short amount of time, Spoink would be done for, and that makes Spoink's life just as mentally torturous as it would be physically, which results in a pretty dang awful and miserable life overall for this cute little pig Pokemon. If there's one piece of solace that Spoink can take from this, however, it's the fact that it's not the only Pokemon who has to live with this kind of torture. Mimikyu is famously another Pokemon whose entire life is nothing but misery, and it has to do with one of the worst kinds of them all: soul-crushing loneliness. Oh, and involuntary murder. Yeah, there's that too. This all stems from the reason why Mimikyu wears a Pikachu disguise in the first place. Not only does it just want to be popular like Pikachu, which is sad enough on its own, but it has to wear a disguise, because if it looks at anyone with its true face, it will kill them. Mimikyu's Pokedex entries describe this exact situation, and truthfully, there probably isn't a sadder Pokemon in existence. Imagine having to completely cover your entire face and body to even be able to hang out with anyone at all, and being so ugly, terrifying, or whatever it is in Mimikyu's case, that you will actually kill whoever looks you directly in the eye. I cannot think of a lonelier, more depressing life than that, and it makes me genuinely feel terrible for Mimikyu and what it has to go through. Unfortunately, no generation or type of Pokemon is safe from a life of torture, as the next Pokemon on this list is Psyduck. While Psyduck doesn't have to fear death or killing people like our two previous entries, it has to deal with constant, never-ending pain, which might be just as awful. According to Psyduck's Pokedex entries, it always has a headache. Always. This is why it always holds its head, and it's where its psychic powers come from. I'm sure those who have suffered from migraines can tell you that having a headache 24/7 would not be a fun time. But imagine being a dopey little thing like Psyduck, and these headaches, which are the bane of your existence, are what give you the one cool quality you have going for yourself, which are Psyduck's psychic powers. But then, due to the nature of these powers, you aren't even able to remember the cool powers you just used, as the Pokédex also mentions. If you were a Psyduck, you would literally be in never-ending pain, while also never being able to enjoy an incredible power you have because you're unable to even remember being capable of using it. That sounds like some dirty, rotten, divine prank if you ask me, so next time you run into a Psyduck, maybe try being a little nicer to it. He's trying his best. So far we've had physical pain, emotional pain, and more that is plaguing these Pokemon's lives, and now we also have literal paralyzing fear. Unlike Spoink, who has to keep moving for fear of its own death, Xatu has literally become immovable thanks to its own fear. According to Xatu's Pokédex entries, it is able to look into the future, and it is believed that it stands so still because of the terrible things it has seen. Imagine being in that position, especially as a bird like Xatu, and not a human who could maybe have a small chance to do something about it, where you see something in the future that is so awful that it stops you dead in your tracks, because you know that you have no power whatsoever to do anything about it and are forced to just let it happen, living the rest of your life, every waking moment until that future event happens, with the terribleness of it looming over you as it comes a little closer to reality with each passing day. With each of these Pokemon, it seems like it would be impossible to imagine a worse kind of torture than what they're going through, but Xatu in particular definitely ranks up there with the best of them. Speaking of Pokemon that live in constant fear, Whismur is another Pokemon in that category, and it lives in constant fear of itself. According to the Pokédex, it is capable of making very loud noises, even as loud as a jet plane in fact. If it gets startled or senses danger, it'll start crying, which only startles it more and makes it more upset. So unless Whismur is able to live in absolute silence, it's basically going to be constantly terrified and crying, and destroying its own eardrums while it's at it with its jet plane level cries. And it's even depicted how terrified it constantly is in its official artwork, in case you ever doubted how real the fear is for this Pokemon. It doesn't get much worse than being terrified of yourself, because you can kinda never get away from yourself, and for a small Pokemon like Whismur, that's gotta be absolute torture. You know, you'd think a place as beautiful as Hoenn would be a paradise for the local Pokemon there, but it seems as if Whismur isn't the only Hoenn Pokemon who is absolutely suffering. Feebas is a Pokemon that no one likes or wants anything to do with, according to the Pokédex. It constantly mentions how, due to Feebas's appearance, it is ridiculed, ignored, and unwanted by almost everybody. And although it does eventually evolve into a beloved Pokemon in Milotic, that's only if someone takes a chance on it, as thanks to its evolution method, it can only evolve with a trainer's help. So most of the Feebas that don't get caught and raised by trainers are, for the rest of their lives, constantly shunned and ignored, destined to be unloved and all alone until the day they die. This next one is actually a group pick, and it has to do with nearly every single Mega Pokemon that's out there. In case you haven't heard, Mega Evolution absolutely obliterates the bodies of the Pokemon who go through it, resulting in everything from a broken jaw in Mega Glalie case to melting limbs in Mega Garchomp's case. It's rather ironic, in fact, considering that a close bond with a trainer is required for a Pokemon to be able to Mega Evolve, only to be subjected to the largest amount of excruciating pain that any living thing could probably ever experience without actually dying. Heck, even Mega Houndoom is also described as melting, just like Garchomp, in case you doubted what Mega Evolution is really capable of and how widespread this torture is, which just goes to solidify that every moment you have your Pokemon Mega Evolved, you are practically torturing it yourself. The only thing that makes this not unspeakably awful is the fact that it's not permanent, much to the relief, I'm sure, of the Pokemon that have to go through it. Another Pokemon, like many on this list, that is never able to relax is Esper. Esper is one of the more significant Kalos Pokemon out there, but this little cat Pokemon is more than what you see on the surface. According to the Pokedex, Esper possesses intense psychic power that is able to wreak havoc on everything around it, and it has no control over this power. So its life largely consists of it doing everything that it can to prevent this power from getting out, with the Pokedex describing it as an intense struggle. This definitely explains why Esper is known as the Restraint Pokemon, and while I can't really relate to what that must feel like for Esper, I imagine it would be something like holding in a giant fart, except it's a fart that could kill people, and you have to hold it in all the time. When you put it in those terms, it becomes pretty easy to imagine just how miserable this Pokemon's life truly is. One of the original Pokemon that has had an absolutely terrible existence is Parasect. The Pokemon that is Parasect isn't really the Pokemon that it evolves from in Paris, because its body has been completely taken over by the invasive fungus on its back. I mean, imagine your body being infected and controlled by a toxic parasite to the point that you couldn't do anything to help yourself. You would still be aware of your surroundings, you'd still be conscious to some degree, but this infectious fungus would have complete control over you, and you would be at the mercy of whatever it wanted you to do. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I can't imagine a worse existence than what Parasect has to deal with, and the fact that pure mind-controlling torture is the entire concept of this Pokemon's design makes it a bit morbid to say the least, and I genuinely feel sorry for it. Finally, our last Pokemon of the list enjoys a unique kind of torture, and that would be Komala. Komala's Pokedex entries talk about how its entire life, from birth to death, is spent asleep. Now that might not sound so bad, but if you think about it, spending your entire life literally not living and basically being unconscious would be extremely frustrating because you're alive, but you can't go out and live. You're basically forced to be in an immobile state and pretty much are just waiting for the sweet release of death at that point. Additionally, the thing that makes this even worse in Komala's case is the fact that it's not voluntary. And not only is it not voluntary, Komala is this way because it's been drugged. According to the Pokedex, Komala is in a state of eternal sleep because of the sedative properties of the leaves that it eats. So its life essentially consists of being born, having one meal of these leaves, then being knocked out for the rest of its life until it dies. That sounds awesome. Awesomely torturous, that is. Like Feebas and Whismur before it with the Hoenn region, Komala doesn't even get to fully experience the tropical paradise of Alola that it is fortunate enough to call home, and instead, it is forced to watch its life pass by without getting to enjoy any of the wonderful things that Alola has to offer, almost as if it's being purposefully tortured even more, having to witness a beautiful place that it can never enjoy for itself. And that concludes our exciting tour of Pokemon who live in torture every single day. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new, and remember to check out my Spotify, because again, it really helps. With that said, I will see you guys soon with another video, and until then, as always, I love you guys, thanks for watching, and I will smell you guys later.